we were joking around. There was a podium up here, and it kind of felt like Freddie and I would sit on either side of the room and do Mark and Freddie between one podium, kind of a play on Zach Galifianakis and the Between Two Ferns. So if you haven't kind of caught the drift, this is going to be a little bit of some comedy up here. We're going to tell some jokes, have some fun. Come on, let's get a little more lively. All right, there it is. Everybody's got coffee. Everybody made it here.
I think they're a little skeptical. You're talking about a German telling jokes. We're not really known for that.
Well,
we're known for buying a beer, so looking forward to seeing everybody at the happy hour later today as well.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we are sitting on the 50-yard line at Sun Devil Stadium, so we should have started this off with a beer, Freddie.
We should.
Yeah, that'd have been good. Well, for those that I haven't met, my name is Mark Paratore. I'm Vice President of Business Development at the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, also known as GPEC. GPEC serves as the regional economic development organization with the mission of attracting and growing quality business while advocating for the competitiveness of Greater Phoenix. We are a strategic partner to companies all over the world as they're looking to either expand, grow, or relocate their operations to Greater Phoenix, and helping them through cost optimization, labor, incentive analysis, alignment with industry and kind of the ecosystem in general, and even more important, how they're going to align with the brand of Metro Phoenix. And I'm so excited to have the opportunity to sit down here with Frederik. There's a ton of momentum in our market, and when we think about kind of where we're going, we've got to take a look back at where we've been. So when you think about the region, you think about the state, a lot of work has been done to really diversify our economic base. About 10, 15 years ago, I think, the region, the state was really a consumption-based economy. And we've done a great job at really diversifying that economic base to be more innovation-driven. So when you think about emerging industries like advanced manufacturing, semiconductor, next-gen automotive, sustainability and climate technology, to things that are happening around, kind of digital health and AI and the healthcare ecosystem, to a really strong presence here in the region. When you think about legacy industry with aerospace and defense, there's a lot of transferable skill sets from a talent, ecosystem, but also from a corporate standpoint as well. So really excited to be here and have the opportunity to sit down with you, Frederik, who serves as Director of Supply Chain for Plug and Play. And who would have thought 2 years ago when we first met, we'd be sitting on the 50-yard line.
Day. Yeah, April 28th, I checked at Chelsea's Kitchen 2 years ago, and now we're here, Sun Devil Stadium. Very, very nice location, by the way. I'm amazed at how we're like in the middle of the mountain here. Incredible presence also from big companies and tech companies here on Tempe Town Lake. So yeah, everything that Mark said, you can really see the momentum being built here. But yeah, a lot can happen in 2 years, so I'm proud of the progress we've made.
Yeah, that's right. Well, for those that don't know you, tell us a little bit more about Frederik, as well as Plug and Play, and kind of the history and story of Plug and Play, because it's really compelling and something that I think resonated with us in kind of our initial conversations. And as Kate mentioned, we're so thrilled and excited to have Plug and Play here in our market finally.
Yeah, for sure. So about myself, originally from Germany, a town called Cologne, relatively small. In the grand scheme of things, fourth biggest city in Germany. Met my wife actually is from Phoenix, Arizona, at college at NYU, so that was the first touch point that I had with Arizona, and started learning about this great state around about 10, 12 years ago. But I started with Plug and Play 5 years ago out in Berlin, and started really building out the supply chain practice for our European presence. In the supply chain practice, we work with companies like Walmart, Shell, Dell Technologies, DB Schenker, and then the newest cohort really is focused on advanced manufacturing here. And yeah, 3 years ago, probably the worst timing you could imagine at the height of the pandemic, we made the move out to the Bay Area, but yeah, we made it through it, and life is coming back there. But during that time, and we can get into that a little bit more, I really started also looking at other areas, and we as a company started looking at other areas because we believe that innovation is not just a monopoly for Silicon Valley. Like, you can have great founders, great startups come out of pretty much any location, right? And this is something that we as Plug and Play have been doubling down on over many years now. And we started, of course, in Silicon Valley. Our headquarters is in Sunnyvale, the old Philips Semiconductor headquarters that we purchased in 2006. So it's 180,000 square feet of space. that we occupy. Before the pandemic, we had around about 400 to 450 startups in our building at any moment in time, which is really a gravitational pull for investors, other entrepreneurs, corporations from all around the world to come visit us. The invitation is open to all of you here. We have a big event coming up, June 6, 7, and 8, our Silicon Valley Summit. It's basically the Super Bowl of innovation. That's how I like to call it. Also fitting that we're in a football stadium. And we'll have around about 3,000 attendees and hundreds of startups there. But to give you a little bit more background on Plug and Play, we've been investing in companies since the 90s. Our CEO and founder came from very traditional businesses, so the plastics manufacturing business, water bottling business. He even had a rug gallery. He was of Persian descent, so that was one of the first businesses that he kicked off when he made the move from Iran to the US. And over time, over the time he spent in the Valley, he started to get to know startup founders and VCs, and actually made the first investment in PayPal back in the day when he was renting out office space to founders that would just knock on his door because it was downtown Palo Alto, just a short walk from Stanford University, and he saw how quickly tech companies could scale. And the first example was actually when Max Levchin and Peter Thiel were wanting to look for office space, and he wasn't quite sure if they would pay rent on time. So him and his brother said, all right, pay 2 years of rent up front, and we want to put the second year of rent back into the company as equity. And that turned out to be a pretty great investment because a few years later, eBay acquired PayPal for $1.5 billion, and that became our first true investment and also first unicorn. So we thought, okay, this is a pretty interesting business, much higher multiples than the plastics business. Why don't we do more of that? He also very early on got to know the Google founders, so Larry and Sergey. Became best friends with Amit Kodastani, who was the business founder, so the gentleman that really was able to monetize search, was employee number 9, I believe. And that early exposure to some of the initial founders of Silicon Valley made him want to do more and more in startups. And then in 2006, we at that point invested in many different companies, from Lending Club, which became the biggest IPO in 2009 here in the US, to a Dropbox, to now 30 plus unicorns in our portfolio. We have 50 plus locations all around the world. Again, we believe that there are founders and great startups and great ideas anywhere, not just in Silicon Valley. And last year was actually the first time that we made more investments outside of the US than in the US, which is a pretty incredible watershed moment in my opinion, because we see a lot of, again, great ideas all over, and it's the power of that global network that we're looking to tap into and also emulate here, because when I started really looking into Arizona, not only as a great place to visit family in the winters when it's really the most perfect weather that you could imagine, but also as a place where you could do business with amazing investments around advanced manufacturing, healthcare, but also a business-friendly environment with institutes like IM, where you can test autonomous vehicles way before we now have it finally in San Francisco, where you can take an autonomous cruise car. This has been a thing here for a long, long time. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be telling the story that has been built for a long, long time by folks like Startup AZ, Venture Madness, Phoenix Startup Week. There's a lot of really great grassroots initiatives here already, and I look forward for Plug and Play to play a role in that next chapter and help accelerate it.
Thanks. Yeah, and when you talk about kind of like the intersection between, the startups, the corporates, and venture capital, I think there's a lot of alignment with what's happening, within Greater Phoenix and the overall metro. But can you walk us through kind of that structure of Plug and Play and how, how Plug and Play is interacting with startups, but then how the corporates really get a chance to benefit from, those opportunities, and really kind of the partnership or the structure of that. And then I also want to get into a little bit more about, kind of the selection day and your launch event here, kind of announcing the new 15 startups that will be participating in the advanced manufacturing batch. But let's first kind of talk about kind of the intersection between those three kind of groups and how that functions within Plug and Play.
Yeah, of course. So we invest in a lot of startups, of course, but there's also a lot of money, a lot of VCs out there. So why should a startup want plug and play on the cap table? Why would they want our money? We invest relatively small checks very early on. So last year we averaged $100,000, which is not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but what we enable startups to do is scale fast through our corporate network. So we work with 550 major corporations across supply chain, health, advanced manufacturing, insurtech, fintech, you name it. And when I started my first company, which failed quickly, thankfully, but it did fail, when I was working for startups, the thing that I always wanted the most is help on the sales side, help on the business development side, and being able to connect to the right decision maker quickly. And this is what Plug and Play really offers. And we work with typically the director level all the way to the C-suite, and we help cut down that proof of concept cycle from typically years to a couple of months, a couple of weeks sometimes, depending on what kind of solution the startups have to offer. And we really help the founders tap into that network and help, again, accelerate their growth. And what's in it for the corporations, basically, we help them cut through the noise. I mean, there are so many startups, so many people that are reaching out to them day in, day out, be that on LinkedIn, be that at conferences, be that over email. And through our due diligence process and our expertise that our 150 plus ventures associates and analysts and principals have built up, we're able to really distinguish between, is this just vaporware and somebody has a great idea and is promising you the moon and everything under the sun, or is this something that can actually live up to the expectations and deliver a true ROI for you? And we've had, great programs, be that in Stuttgart, the startup Autobahn, and at the OEM, the entire car industry, there's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, be that our healthcare programs, be that hopefully soon also the advanced manufacturing program. And there, we need to give a shout out to the Arizona Commerce Authority, who have really been enabling us to launch here. And we've been working with Sandra Watson and her team on making Plug and Play Arizona a reality. And there we're going to be focusing in this first cohort, in this first batch, on advanced manufacturing on the semiconductor and aviation and aerospace side. So Honeywell Aerospace, Raytheon, Missile and Defense, and Intel are the first partners we announced 3 weeks ago at the launch event in Warehouse 215, so not too far away from here. And we're looking to add 2 more, one in the semiconductor space and one in the automotive battery electric space that we'll be announcing over the next few months. And yeah, you mentioned already we had 15 startups there, one of which is also a Phoenix startup, Yellowbird, that just 2 days ago, I think, announced it publicly. 6.25 million seed round, startup AZ alum. Diana just informed me or reminded me of that again. And we invested in them out of the fund, and we couldn't be more proud to already be an active investor, an active community member here in Arizona. But we should be announcing the final selection within the next couple of weeks. We have now meetings with these corporate partners, getting their feedback. Which startups did you like? Where do you see an opportunity to work with them? And I'm proud to say that we will probably already have 4 pilot projects coming out of this, and hopefully can share more about that publicly soon.
Yeah, well, that's exciting, and I don't know if anybody from Yellowbird is here, but congratulations on that. Also, too, if you were at the event, you probably heard that news. If you weren't, shame on you for not being there, but you're here today, so that's what matters as well. Frederik, walk us through a little bit about when you talk about kind of the advanced manufacturing batch and kind of the selection day, but then also launch of Plug and Play in Arizona. What does that look like for an ecosystem like ours? You probably have a good mix of those that represent startups, as well as maybe even some corporate partners, as well as even just kind of community partners and organizations. But I think collectively, when we think about the region, there's this tremendous flywheel effect that could have. But I think as far as the structure goes, probably for our audience, wanting to know a little bit more of when you talk about the batch of advanced manufacturing and the programming of that, the various pilots as well as expos, what does that look like for a market like ours?
Yeah. Well, let me say, it takes a village to really make this successful, right? And whenever we looked at the the locations, our offices all around the world. What makes those successful is when everybody comes together. That's the government players, that's the private sector players, that's the startups, that's academia, research institutions, and we have that perfect set of ingredients right here in Phoenix, but also across the state. So we are right now relatively early on, of course, still, but we've already made some great progress. So ASU has been really involved in this. Just the other day, Saida Media, our CEO, and I had a call with Grace O'Sullivan and the team at ASU and the Knowledge Enterprise to further understand what we're doing. 2 days from now, we're visiting the Macro Technology Works, so the semiconductor research fab down in Chandler, I believe it is, with the ASU. So it's all about really being ingrained in the local ecosystem, and the ask for you, everybody in the audience, is help us connect the dots, right? The more we know, the more people we get to build a relationship with, the easier it is for us to then plug those in, pardon the pun, plug and play, to plug them into the international or even national network that we have. And right now, it's really one-on-one meetings and workshops and progress with the business units, right, to really understand their challenges from the private sector, and then helping the startups navigate those discussions. Because the last thing that we want is that a startup is stuck in a 9, 12, 18-month procurement cycle that these corporations are used to and love to put their vendors through. That could be the death to a startup, right? Because they might only have a few more months of runway and they need to get a pilot project done to then be able to raise a second follow-on funding round. And we're really here to help shorten that time frame. And an example that we always like to share is with Mercedes-Benz. At our last year's expo back in July 2022, Ola Kalenius, the CEO of Mercedes, announced the EQXX, which is Mercedes' most innovative car ever. And it goes on one charge, 800 kilometers, like 600, 500 miles maybe, and has 5 startup technologies that we introduced to them, built into the car. And they were able to cut their innovation and implementation cycle from typically 5 years or so to less than 18 months, from meeting the startup to having it in the car. And we're talking about automotive grade. And of course, when we then talk to Todd Giles and the team at Honeywell, they say, well, we have aerospace grade, that's even more difficult. But if we can have a similar effect in expediting that process, I consider ourselves to be successful here in Arizona. And that's the goal. And of course, another ask that I would want to put out, if you have a great idea, come pitch it to us. Like, we want to invest, we want to deploy capital, because even though when you read the news with layoffs and crises and potential economic downturns, I believe that this is the best time to start a company, because labor is cheap. With incredible tools around generative AI, you are able to do more with less. It's a whole new frontier of opportunities. So I look forward to one day be sitting here, maybe in 2 years, and we can talk about the first unicorn that we invested in Arizona. So
yeah, that'd be great. When we think about kind of even from an economic development perspective, best practices across various regions or even states for that matter that are doing things well. Obviously we've talked about a lot of the successes, opportunities, and kind of momentum, but that doesn't mean that there aren't challenges, ahead of us. What are some of the best practices or kind of attributes that have worked well in other markets that you hope you can really kind of help, intentionally impact here within the region, just based upon some of your initial perceptions over the last couple of years of seeing things, but then what's worked well in other markets? And I know we've talked previously about things in Arkansas, but I'd love your take on that.
Yeah, Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas. If you've never been, I recommend you go.
First off, raise your hand if you've never been to Northwest Arkansas. Oh, actually, there's more people that have been there.
Oh, that's surprising.
Not bad.
But yeah, for the folks who don't know, a little retailer called Walmart is headquartered there, as well as J.B. Hunt and Tyson Foods. And what's been incredible about that ecosystem is that you see that the local corporations put their money where their mouth is, right? And they are really engaged in turning that region into a place that you would want to be at. And one thing that I noticed here is that there's been a lot of wealth that has been created in Arizona, particularly on the real estate side. We need to get the real estate investors, the real estate high net worth individuals off the bench and start investing into venture. It's a little bit more risky, right? It is a little bit unknown, but that's what really needs to happen here to accelerate that next phase and really make this outrageous claim of in 2 years we'll have a unicorn here to talk about a reality. Because when you look again at our CEO, he was a real estate investor. He had traditional businesses, but when he then started actually taking a risk and investing into startups and working with a lot of people along the way, of course, he now can say that he has more unicorns in his portfolio than most sovereign states. He always likes to give that example. Finland has 5 unicorns. We have 34. You know, like that needs to happen here, and we're seeing it, right? With Jack Selby and AZVC, with Andy Lombard and Arizona Venture Development Corporations, there are now pretty big funds, but we can do so much more here in Arizona, I believe.
When you think about kind of the expansion of other batches and industry verticals, I think we've talked about this before, a lot aligned with like the momentum in the market of kind of that next generation of emerging industries. But what are some of the industries that you think would work really well within the region, and probably for some of the startups that are in that space? Just kind of walk us through a bit more about some of the innovative technology that you're seeing across the different both domestic locations that you have a presence in, but also the international markets as well, that these leading edge founders and innovators that are solving some critical problems for these corporations.
So beyond advanced manufacturing, of course, there's going to be a lot of opportunity with TSMC and Intel and the entire supplier network investing tens of billions of dollars here. Besides that, I think what Mayo and ASU have been doing with the MedTech Accelerator has already been taking advantage of the strong footprint that we have around biotech and healthcare here in Phoenix and Arizona. And that is going to be another sector that we're looking into to really see what can be done around health. One of the sectors that I am probably most passionate about, and where I see also a big branding opportunity for Arizona, is around sustainability, water resilience, sustainable mining, something that we could coin desert tech, whatever it may be, but really make Arizona the American Israel, right? Because everybody looks to Israel as the most innovative country, the startup nation, and they've overcome incredible challenges, especially around building out a very successful nation with basically no fresh water. How can Arizona emulate that? And we will, of course, also launch our own sustainability practice here, but I think that is a very unique challenge for Arizona in particular, and also a unique opportunity to position itself globally amongst the entrepreneurial community.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about what's in kind of the collective DNA of us in Arizona and in the region, really we're a proving grounds for innovation. And I think if we can really kind of harness the opportunities in kind of natural resources that we have access to, but really being a location that you can test, deploy, and scale, and doing so in a way that you've got a true collaboration amongst the startup community, the corporations, and the talent ecosystem that currently exists, both from universities, K through 12 education, and the talent pipeline, but also from a net migration perspective of we are no longer just a flyover, but rather, sorry, I feel like I'm looking at this side of the room, so I'm going to focus my attention over here a little bit as well. But we're no longer just a flyover, but rather a destination for individuals that are also looking to either start their career or really accelerate their career. One interesting fact of we've seen, on average, about 100,000 people that are relocating here. One change that we've seen is from an age demographic, breakdown. It's no longer the older population that is just relocating here for a second or third home or to retire, but rather 18 to 44 or 54 years old individuals that are looking to relocate here. So that tells us a couple of things. One is maybe they're looking to enter the university or kind of start their career, as well as accelerate their career, ensuring that that institutional kind of knowledge set that is critical in a lot of other markets, whether it's the Bay Area to the East Coast and even internationally. How can we harness those opportunities to really expand upon the growth trajectory of a place like Greater Phoenix? And as I mentioned, I think a lot of that activity is now happening more inward, where you're no longer seeing, even from an international perspective, I think the coastal markets have always reaped the benefit because those were in close proximity and a bit more familiar. And if you kind of look at, even Steve Case with his Rise of the Rest, thinking about more inland opportunities, a place like Greater Phoenix can really kind of emerge as a location of choice based upon that. So it's pretty exciting.
I have a question for you. You at GPEC and you in particular have been working a lot with VCs from out of state in particular, hosting them during a great tournament at the Waste Management Open, of course showcasing the region from its best side. But what's been the feedback on that front? I'm sure that there's some interest from those coastal VCs as well to pay more attention here.
Yeah, and to that point, I think we are seeing a lot more activity where not only from the fund creation, so new funds that have now started here, as Frederik mentioned, with AZVC and Jack Selby, to Andy Lombard at Arizona Venture Development Corporation, ABC, groups like Pangea Ventures on the hard tech and hard sciences side of things. I think we're seeing the opportunity where funds that historically haven't looked at places like Greater Phoenix are now starting to look here in Arizona because of the great success of startups that have been here, but also the emergence of new technology and innovation that's taking place here. So I think a couple of things. One is because of the pandemic, getting access to venture capital funds, it no longer has any boundaries or geographical kind of restraints, right? You can access that through different platforms as well as different events that are happening. I think being able to showcase, opportunities like this and all the other events that go on and getting more people interested about what's happening in a place like Greater Phoenix, outside of it just being a mecca for, back office and call center, which a lot of people thought about Greater Phoenix being that place because it was a low cost of doing business. It had a great quality of life, and for a lot of these companies, it was a great place to kind of set up their back office operations and functions. But as I mentioned, we've really transformed our economy and economic base, where we're seeing a lot more diversity in different industry verticals that now are allowing these VCs and investors to think differently about their approach, and no longer just thinking about places like California, New York, or Boston based upon maybe some historic kind of legacy industries that have typically existed there, as well as just getting past some of those perceptions. We like to think that, once we get individuals here, the market really sells itself, but we've got to get past some of those perceptions of it's just hot, there's a lot of tumbleweeds, and everybody just comes out here to play golf. While it's great to be able to showcase that through, some of the special events that we have, there's a lot more, and I think people are realizing it's a great place to either start your business, accelerate your business, because of the generosity of our ecosystem and our market. Because most people aren't from here. So I think there's this, kind of innate difference of those that come from all places of the world that really just want to make a difference and make an impact. And everybody has a willingness to really kind of, the mentality of success breeds success. And I think we're seeing that as part of it. There's a lot of work, don't get me wrong, that needs to be done. If we were playing football right now, which we're not, but I'd probably be like a wide receiver, I'm thinking. You think so?
Sure. For me, football is soccer. Yeah.
Oh, that's so right.
I'd be a defender.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'd be a striker then. I'd be just coming right after it. Yeah. So, anyways. If we were playing American football, I think we're at the 50-yard line, kind of heading towards, kind of the goal line. There's kind of that tip of the spear of just this momentum. And I think we've done a great job of kind of getting through some of those. But yeah.
Rice was a wide receiver, right? Did you get some pointers from him?
I did.
At our summit?
I got to meet him at the Plug and Play Tech Summit. So that's maybe a plug for, he's got a really cool drink called Goat Fuel. So kind of appropriate. Yeah, it was actually a pretty awesome experience. So, I don't know how we are on time. I think Kate gave us okay, we got 10 minutes.
So we can start opening up for questions. I think you still have a couple more, but yeah, we want to make sure that if you have any questions, pointers, that you also get a chance. So please feel free to speak up.
I think one thing before we get into questions, is, if you had some advice for those in the audience that are startups, what would be kind of your advice as, they're looking to, kind of accelerate, their business opportunities, and, how can our ecosystem really help, plug and play with some of that? But I think some advice for startups may be helpful.
Advice for startups. I mean, there's a lot, but for us, or the way that we can help is reach out to us, right? Like we have Dave and Brian here from the Arizona team for Plug and Play, so introduce yourself, number one. We can then connect you to the right people, right? And don't just see us as Plug and Play Arizona, Plug and Play Advanced Manufacturing. There is so much more to us all around the world across different sectors, and there are a lot of opportunities for us to help you. And the easiest piece of advice is be engaged and show up when it matters. But of course also stay laser focused, right? And make sure that whatever event you go to, whatever call you have, that there is a purpose to it. And you measure your success, you go after key milestones, and have a set of advisors, mentors, and key contacts that can help you get to that next level. And Plug and Play typically is a good starting point for that, because we have a pretty broad network of executive leaders, VCs, government partners, you name it, where we can then point you in the right direction.
Perfect.
We do have a question back here.
All right, let's go.
Hey guys, Adrian McIntyre. I'm a time friend of Plug and Play through the media and advertising program. Frederik, you said something I'd love to have you unpack a little bit more, because in addition to your insights about many different aspects that are relevant to the startup ecosystem, when it comes to corporate innovation, you referred to the long drawn out and very painful procurement process. As somebody who sells creative services, I'm familiar with that, but it's slightly different. Talk a little bit about how big corps buy innovation, and what are some of the unique angles that folks here should be thinking about, and how you can be a resource for that.
Well, there's different ways of procuring innovation when you're a big corporation, but what we typically see is that if you talk to a head of a business unit or a senior leader that is interested in buying your tech, the next thing that they do once you've convinced them is send you over to the legal and procurement team. And then you get an MSA that's hundreds of pages long and master services agreement, and takes weeks, months for your legal team, which you typically don't have when you're a startup, to look through and vet and make sure that it's good to go. And then once you go through that, there's no sandbox ready, right? Like no sandbox environment for you to test your technology in a controlled environment, but with real data from the corporation to then really prove out a proof of concept, a pilot project, whatever it may be. So what we try to, and sometimes also not successfully, right? Like this is also the journey of an entrepreneur, but what we try to convey with our corporate partners is to really cut that process down and have almost a fast lane for startup technology to test it out. And we work with several partners on a technology readiness level assessment. So we say, hey, this is going to take a few more years until it's really ready to be deployed across Walmart's fleet of 10,000 plus trucks. But it's worth to try the technology now. And let's figure out a relatively easy lift, a project that can be done within 90 to 100 days. And then measure the success based on that. And if it passes that first threshold, we can continue it. And at that point, you've also shown that you have enough skin in the game as a corporation for the startup to invest that extra bit of time. Because the worst thing that you can do is not give it a straight answer. And that's a yes and a no is also fine. But if you just say, yeah, maybe in the future, the entrepreneur, the founder has the hope and the belief that one day you'll sign with them. And that day might never come, or it might come too late. And there's a lot of ways to go about that, but probably the easiest is just have a dedicated procurement cycle for startups, which is much quicker, days versus months, and have sandbox data ready for them to try. But great question.
I think we got one here in the front row. Get you a segue. Okay.
Thank you. Hi guys, my name is Anna Radha. I'm a tech startup founder, pretty new to Phoenix, so it was super interesting to hear you guys talk a little bit about the ecosystem here. So as a founder, one of the key questions, especially being new, kind of figuring out the community here, is obviously access to capital, right? And even though we're living in a remote work now where, of course, you can access to capital from the Valley, from New York, wherever in the world, but we all know that relationships matter, right? So could you talk a little bit more about the venture, climate here in Phoenix and what that looks like? Because also, when we think about if we, look beyond the obvious startup hubs like New York and, SF and LA, whatnot, now some of the new emerging hubs like, Miami and Austin, and kind of there's a lot of things buzzing, and for very selfish reasons, I would love to see that now, I guess, here in Phoenix. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more. Do we see that kind of ecosystem and that kind of buzz, and especially from the perspective of access to capital?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I do think we are starting to see that. I would say the biggest thing has been, the funds that are now starting to deploy capital here or infuse capital here, maybe have alignment with other industry verticals that otherwise wasn't happening. So, groups like, Accelerant Ventures, that's more on kind of the healthcare, focused type of fund. We still have a lot more on, or a lot more areas where I think we could focus from alignment with some of the other emerging, industry verticals outside of, whether it's just SaaS or kind of software in general. But yeah, I think we are starting to see kind of that momentum, and a lot of that's predicated, I think, on this, industry diversification that's taking place within the region. And I mean, you're probably seeing or hearing, stuff in Miami around, blockchain or cryptocurrency. So funds that are really focused on that. And I think we'll start to kind of see, some of the or reap some of the rewards and benefits because of, the advancements that are being made. With a lot of the emerging industry, it's very capital intensive, so it takes a lot of money to really expand on those opportunities. But yeah, I definitely think we're more of an emerging market in some of those areas as far as fund deployment as well as fund creation. And there's a lot of great organizations and different events throughout the year that really kind of focus on that, whether it's on the pitch competitions, some quarterly type of events that are really encouraging more VCs and investors to connect with startups and different founders. A lot of times it's the chicken and the egg. You need to make sure that there's enough startups to invest in, but also need to make sure that there's enough money for those companies to be invested in. So.
Yeah, I'd also say that there's a lot of specific funds being created. So I'm thinking of tomorrow evening at 4 p.m. we have Mark Mormons talking about Journey, which is a healthcare for diverse founders. That's from Justin Bayless, who is a very successful startup here. Zach Ferris will be here tomorrow talking about his fund. Heidi Janangle will be on Friday talking about her fund. So these are all people that sat in your seats at one point, had some success, and now are giving back to the community.
And I think some areas like Salt Lake City where you're seeing a lot of those opportunities, it's that flywheel effect that we always see that works, right? If you have a big exit from a company and a founder that then reinvests those dollars back into the ecosystem. And a great example would be Greg Scoresby with Phoenix Ventures here with Campus Logic. So I think once we kind of hit that critical mass where we'll continue to see that, having those funds go back into the ecosystem creates that flywheel where you got generosity, you've got performance, you got talent. Talent and capital, once they start to compound, a lot of great things can happen. And I think that's been evident with some of the markets that have really accelerated their growth. So,
other questions?
Hi, I'm Evan Darcy. I'm another founder. You had mentioned, Frederik, earlier that there's some of these traditional real estate wealth pools in Phoenix, and what are some ways that founders can kind of try to help get them kind of to participate in some of the venture funds, and is there something collectively we all can be doing better to kind of get that money flowing in the right direction? Well, in our direction.
I mean, if you have personal relationships with them, right, convince them of that and get them to be part of the friends and family round very early on. Besides that, to also the earlier question, VCs tend to talk a lot with one another as well, right? So once you know one, ask them for introductions to other people that might be interested in having a conversation, that might be ready to deploy some capital in you. But I think it's just going to take a little bit of time and show also some successes. I know that again, Jack and AZVC have a lot of LPs from the real estate industry, and I think once we see some early successes coming out of that fund, more will want to be part of that next cohort of VCs, and I think folks like Greg are setting also a great example of you can make your money in one domain and then help give back while also being very successful in your next endeavor with Phoenix Ventures. So I don't have an easy answer. At the end of the day, it's relationships, building trust, and then also not being too shy to make the ask, right? If you know somebody would be able to write you a $100,000 check, make that ask.
And I think I saw Matt Sherman back there with Seed Scout, so you may want to talk to him as well. He's got a really cool platform connecting, founders and capital as well. So, how's it going, Matt? Good to see you, man.
Great. All right, let's go.
Let's go. All right.
You can also follow PHX and Phoenix Startup Week. We are the stage for our ecosystem, so we promote everyone. Every time we hear a new fund, every time we hear about something going well, we let everybody know about it. That's what we like to do. Okay, thank you, Frederik. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Great.